Darnell Johnson was a calm and confident man. He wore a neat blue suit, a crisp white shirt, and polished black shoes that clicked softly as he walked. His hair was short and carefully styled, and he had a kind but serious look in his brown eyes. That morning, he stepped out of his sleek black car and walked toward the entrance of the car dealership. The sun was shining, birds were singing softly, and the air smelled fresh. It was an ordinary day, but for Darnell this was a big moment. Darnell had just bought the dealership, but not many people knew it yet. He had worked very hard to get this place. For years he had saved money, made smart decisions, and built strong connections. He was proud of his achievement but wanted to take a quiet approach. Instead of making a big announcement, he wanted to see how things worked inside. He wanted to watch the staff, listen to customers, and understand the everyday life of the dealership before making any changes. As he opened the glass door, the inside of the dealership looked bright and shiny. The floors were clean, the cars were polished, and the smell of new leather filled the air. Salespeople stood behind desks, talking quietly to customers or typing on their computers. But when Darnell walked in, something changed. Some of the employees stopped what they were doing and looked at him. Their eyes narrowed just a little and their smiles disappeared. The warm, welcoming atmosphere suddenly felt cold and quiet. Darnell noticed the change but didn't say anything. He walked slowly toward the main office where the manager, Greg Thomas, worked. Greg was a tall, heavy-set man in his early 50s, with graying hair and a stern face. He was known around the dealership for being strict and in charge. Many people said he ran the place with a strong hand and didn't like surprises. When Greg saw Darnell, he immediately frowned. He didn't recognize the man and didn't like how he looked. Darnell was a black man, and Greg was used to dealing with mostly white customers who looked a certain way. Greg's eyes scanned Darnell from head to toe with suspicion. He thought, "Who is this guy? Why is he here? Does he even belong in this place?" Greg walked straight up to Darnell and spoke in a loud, commanding voice. "Can I help you?" he asked, but there was no kindness in his tone. It sounded more like a challenge. Darnell smiled politely and said, "I'm just here to look around." But Greg wasn't interested in listening. He cut him off quickly and said, "You can't just walk in here. This is a professional place. If you're not buying, you need to leave." Darnell was surprised but stayed calm. He wanted to explain that he was the new owner, but Greg's attitude made him think it wouldn't help. Greg didn't want to hear anything. He just wanted Darnell out. The other staff watched quietly, some feeling uncomfortable but not saying anything. "Sir, please leave now," Greg repeated, stepping closer. Darnell took a deep breath and replied softly, "I'll be back." Without another word, he turned and walked out through the same glass door he had entered. Outside, Darnell paused for a moment. He looked back at the building, noticing the shiny cars and the people inside who didn't know who he really was. He felt a mixture of disappointment and determination. This was not the welcome he expected, but he wasn't angry. Instead, he was more motivated than ever to make things better, not just for himself, but for everyone connected to the dealership. As he got into his car, Darnell thought about the next steps. He knew that changing old attitudes and habits wouldn't be easy. Greg and some of the staff were stuck in their ways, judging people before getting to know them. But Darnell believed in respect, fairness, and giving everyone a chance. He wanted to show them what real leadership looked like. The dealership, to Darnell, was more than just a business. It was a place where people came to find their dream cars, to make important decisions, and to trust the people helping them. But if the staff treated customers unfairly, that trust would be broken. Darnell wanted to create an environment where everyone felt welcome, no matter who they were or what they looked like. Later that day, Greg sat back in his office, feeling pleased with himself. He thought he had done the right thing by asking Darnell to leave. He believed he was protecting the dealership's reputation and keeping things professional. Greg had always been proud of his control over the place and thought no one could challenge him. He didn't realize that the man he kicked out was the new boss, the one who would soon change everything. Meanwhile, the rest of the staff started talking quietly among themselves. Some felt awkward about how the situation was handled. A few thought Greg had been too harsh. Others wondered if they should have spoken up. But most were silent, watching what would happen next. Darnell's visit was just the beginning of a story that would shake the dealership to its core. It was a story about respect, fairness, and learning to see people for who they truly are, not just the color of their skin or their appearance. And it all started with a man who walked in quietly, only to be turned away. After Darnell Johnson left the dealership that morning, things inside didn't go back to normal as quickly as Greg Thomas had hoped. Greg sat in his office chair feeling proud of himself. In his mind, he had done the right thing by telling the man to leave. He thought he had protected the dealership's image and kept everything under control. Greg believed the dealership was a place for serious business, and anyone who didn't fit his idea of a customer didn't belong there. Greg tapped his fingers on the desk and leaned back, satisfied. He thought no one would question his decision. After all, he was the manager, and he had the final say. But as the hours passed, a strange feeling settled in the air around the dealership. The employees whispered in small groups, stealing glances at the empty space where Darnell had stood just moments before. Some of the staff didn't agree with Greg. They thought it was wrong to treat a customer, or anyone, like that. They remembered how calm and polite Darnell had been, even when he was asked to leave. They wondered why Greg had acted so harshly. Was it just a misunderstanding, or something deeper? One of the salespeople, Maria, who had been watching everything closely, shook her head. "That wasn't right," she said quietly to a co-worker. "We should treat everyone with respect, no matter what." Another employee, James, nodded in agreement but said nothing aloud. Many others felt uncomfortable but didn't speak up. The dealership's atmosphere had changed. It was less friendly, less open. Later that day, Greg received an email on his computer. He clicked it open without much interest, expecting it to be another routine message from the corporate office. But when he read the subject line, his eyes widened in surprise. "Introducing the new owner and regional executive." Greg opened the email and scanned the message. It was from the parent company that owned the dealership. The email explained that the dealership had been sold recently, and a new owner was taking charge. The new owner was also the regional executive, responsible for several dealerships in the area. Attached to the email was a photo. Greg's stomach dropped as he stared at the man smiling confidently in the picture. It was the same man he had kicked out that morning, Darnell Johnson. Greg couldn't believe it. How had he not known? How could he have treated the owner like a stranger, like someone who didn't belong? The realization hit him hard, and a mix of emotions flooded through him: shock, embarrassment, anger, and fear. He tried to convince himself it must be a mistake. Maybe the email was meant for someone else, or the new owner looked similar to the man from the morning, but wasn't the same person. Greg closed the email and reopened it several times, hoping to find an explanation. But the facts were clear. The staff soon found out too. Word spread quickly. By mid-afternoon, whispers filled the dealership. "Did you hear about the new owner? Is it true he was here this morning? How did Greg not know?" Maria approached Greg nervously. "Boss, I think we need to be ready for when Mr. Johnson comes back. We need to act professional," she said kindly. Greg nodded stiffly but felt trapped. He didn't know how to face Darnell after what happened. His mind raced with questions. Would Darnell be angry? Would he fire Greg on the spot? Would the staff lose respect for him? Meanwhile, Darnell was preparing for his official visit. After the email was sent, he had been busy organizing meetings with the corporate team. He wanted to make a smooth transition but also planned to observe how things really worked at the dealership. When Darnell heard about Greg's actions, he felt a mix of emotions. He was disappointed, but not surprised. he knew there were still many people who judged others based on old beliefs and appearances. He was determined to change that. As the day went on, employees began to feel the tension. Some worried about their jobs, others about how the leadership change would affect them. The friendly chatter of previous weeks was replaced by quiet uncertainty. In the manager's office, Greg paced back and forth, replaying the morning's encounter over and over. He remembered the look on Darnell's face when he asked him to leave. Calm, respectful, but firm. It bothered Greg deeply. Greg realized that this new owner was not just any businessman. Darnell was smart, confident, and had a vision. Greg had acted based on old habits and assumptions, not facts. Now he faced the consequences. That evening, as the dealership closed, the lights dimmed, and the cars sat silently, Greg sat alone in his office. He stared at the email again, knowing that the days ahead would be very different. He thought about how the story might unfold. Would he be given a chance to explain himself? Or would this be the beginning of the end for him at the dealership? The next morning, the whole dealership buzzed with excitement and nerves. Darnell was scheduled to return with the corporate team, officially taking over as the new owner and executive. Everyone was waiting to see how the day would unfold. No one could forget that first morning when Darnell walked in quietly and was asked to leave. That moment had changed everything. The morning sunlight streamed through the large glass windows of the car dealership as Darnell Johnson returned. This time, he did not enter quietly or unnoticed. He was accompanied by a team from the parent company, the corporate transition team, who had come to support him in taking over the dealership officially. Their presence made it clear to everyone inside that something important was happening. As Darnell walked through the showroom, heads turned. Employees stopped what they were doing, some with surprise, some with nervousness. The man who had been asked to leave just days ago was now coming back as the new owner, and everyone knew it. There was a mix of feelings in the air: excitement, curiosity, but also tension. Greg Thomas sat in his office, waiting. He knew Darnell was coming back, and he was not sure how to face him. His mind was busy thinking of what to say, how to explain, how to protect himself. He felt small and unsure for the first time in years. The confidence he usually showed was replaced by worry. When Darnell entered Greg's office, the room felt different. Darnell was calm, but his eyes were steady and serious. Greg stood up quickly, trying to hide his discomfort behind a forced smile. "Mr. Johnson, welcome back," Greg said, but his voice lacked warmth. Darnell nodded and smiled gently. "Thank you, Greg. I'm glad to be here." Then, without wasting any time, Darnell spoke about the first visit, the morning when Greg asked him to leave. "I came here a few days ago and you asked me to leave," Darnell said quietly but clearly. "I didn't say much then, but I want to talk about it now." Greg swallowed hard, feeling the weight of his mistake. Darnell continued, "I understand you may have thought I was just another visitor. But what you did wasn't policy or procedure, it was judgment." Greg looked down, unable to meet Darnell's eyes. Darnell didn't raise his voice or accuse him harshly. Instead, he spoke with honesty and respect, making Greg realize how serious the situation was. "I believe every person deserves respect," Darnell said. "That means customers, employees, everyone. And as the owner, it is my job to make sure this dealership is a place where respect is the foundation." Greg nodded slowly, understanding this was a turning point. After their private conversation, Darnell called a meeting with the entire staff in the showroom. The employees gathered, some looking nervous, others curious. They all wanted to hear what the new owner had to say. Darnell stood in front of them, confident but approachable. He spoke about his vision for the dealership, how he wanted it to grow, how he wanted the staff to work as a team, and most importantly, how he wanted everyone to treat each other with fairness and kindness. He said, "This dealership is not just about selling cars, it's about building trust with our customers and with each other. We will succeed only if we respect every person who walks through our doors." He looked directly at Greg and added, "We need to change the way things have been done here. It's time for a new era." The room was silent for a moment. Then, slowly, people began to nod. Some smiled. The atmosphere started to shift. For Greg, it was a difficult moment. He realized that his old ways of running the dealership were no longer acceptable. But instead of resisting, he decided to listen and learn. Darnell's calm and fair approach made it easier for the staff to accept the change. They saw that he was not just another boss, but a leader who wanted to make things better for everyone. After the meeting, many employees came up to Darnell, thanking him for his words and sharing their hopes for the future. Over the next few days, Darnell worked closely with the corporate team to review how the dealership operated. He met with salespeople, mechanics, customer service representatives, listening to their ideas and concerns. He discovered that many of the problems in the dealership came from old habits and fear of change. But with patience and respect, Darnell began to build trust. Greg, too, started to change. He attended training sessions on leadership and diversity, learning about the importance of fairness and inclusion. He realized that being a good manager wasn't just about control, it was about supporting people. Darnell didn't stop at words. He made sure the dealership's policies reflected his values. He introduced new customer service standards, fairness in hiring, and open communication. Within weeks, the culture of the dealership started to improve. Customers noticed the difference. Sales increased as more people felt welcomed and respected. Darnell's return that day was more than just a visit. It was the beginning of a transformation. His leadership showed that true respect and fairness are powerful tools that can change people, places, and lives. And for Greg, that moment was the start of a journey. From judgment to understanding. From fear to acceptance. The dealership was no longer the same place it had been just days before. It was becoming a place of hope, opportunity, and respect, all because one man walked in, was asked to leave, and came back stronger than ever. After Darnell Johnson's return and his clear message to the staff, the atmosphere at the dealership started to change slowly but surely. But change, especially when it involves long-standing habits and attitudes, is never easy. The days after his visit were filled with a mixture of hope, tension, and uncertainty. Darnell knew that for real change to happen, it had to be more than just words. It had to be about action. One of the first steps Darnell took was to involve corporate human resources, HR, in what was happening. The story of Greg Thomas's behavior, asking Darnell to leave without knowing who he was, had raised serious concerns. But what was more alarming were other stories that started coming forward from employees and even customers. These stories told of moments when people felt judged, ignored, or treated unfairly, especially when they didn't fit into the usual expectations of the dealership. The HR team began a careful, confidential investigation. They spoke with employees from different departments, sales, service, administration, and asked about their experiences. Many shared stories of feeling excluded or disrespected. Some recalled times when Greg had been impatient or unfair. A few were afraid to speak up at first, worried about losing their jobs, but Darnell's leadership gave them courage. At the same time, customers were also giving feedback. Some had noticed the cold treatment toward certain people. Word of mouth was spreading, and that could hurt the business. Darnell knew that changing the culture of the dealership was not only the right thing to do, it was also important for the company's success. While the investigation went on, Darnell focused on building trust with the staff. He made a point of meeting employees one-on-one, listening carefully to their thoughts and concerns. He didn't just want to hear good news. He wanted to understand what was really happening on the ground. Many employees appreciated this new openness. They felt that, for the first time, their voices mattered. Some shared ideas on how to improve customer service. suggesting better training and clearer communication. Others spoke about the need for fairness in promotions and daily treatment. Greg Thomas, meanwhile, was facing the consequences of his actions. When the investigation's findings were clear, corporate decided that Greg's behavior could not continue. He was given a chance to respond, but ultimately was dismissed from his position as manager. Greg's dismissal sent a strong message to the staff. The dealership was serious about creating a respectful and fair workplace. Some employees felt relief, others felt uncertain about the future. Change can be scary, especially when it comes quickly. To help ease the transition, Darnell and the corporate team brought in new leadership, someone who shared Darnell's values of respect and inclusion. This new manager was committed to supporting the team, encouraging open communication, and making sure that everyone was treated fairly. The new manager quickly set up regular meetings where employees could share their ideas and concerns without fear. There was an emphasis on teamwork, kindness, and professionalism. Slowly, the mood in the dealership began to lift. Darnell also invested in training programs for all employees, including management. These programs focused on understanding bias, improving communication skills, and creating an inclusive workplace. The goal was not just to avoid mistakes, but to build a culture where everyone felt valued. One day, during a team meeting, an employee named Sarah shared her experience. She talked about how she had sometimes felt invisible, as if her opinions didn't matter. But since the changes, she felt more confident and motivated. Others nodded in agreement, sharing similar feelings. Darnell listened carefully, knowing that these small stories showed real progress. The dealership was becoming more than just a place to sell cars. It was becoming a community. The customers began to notice the difference too. More people returned to the dealership because they felt welcome and respected. Sales numbers improved, and the company's reputation grew stronger. Darnell often reminded his team, "Respect is the foundation of everything we do. When we treat people well, success follows." The journey was not without challenges. Some employees struggled to adapt, and there were moments of frustration. But Darnell's leadership was steady. He encouraged patience and understanding, knowing that real change takes time. As the months passed, the dealership's culture transformed. The stories of judgment and unfair treatment became memories, replaced by stories of teamwork, respect, and success. For Darnell, the most important victory was seeing the staff grow in confidence and pride. They were no longer just employees. They were part of something bigger, a team that believed in fairness and kindness. Greg Thomas's chapter at the dealership had ended, but his story served as a reminder of why change was necessary. It showed that leadership is about more than authority. It's about respect, understanding, and the courage to do what is right. And as Darnell looked around the dealership, watching his team work together and customers leave happy, he knew the hard work was worth it, because this was not just a business. It was a place where people's lives could change for the better. Months had passed since Darnell Johnson officially took charge of the car dealership. The place looked and felt very different now. The air was lighter, the atmosphere more welcoming. Customers smiled as they walked in, and employees worked with a new energy and pride. The change was not just on the surface. It was deep inside the culture of the dealership. Darnell had spent countless hours working with every part of the business, from sales to service to administration. He knew that the success of the dealership depended on the people who worked there and the trust they built with customers. So he focused on creating a culture where everyone felt valued and respected. One afternoon, as Darnell walked through the showroom, he noticed a young couple looking at a shiny new car. The man was asking questions, and the woman smiled as she pointed at features on the dashboard. Darnell approached them with a warm smile. "Can I help you find the perfect car today?" he asked gently. The couple looked surprised but pleased. "Yes, actually," the woman said. "We heard this dealership has changed a lot recently. We wanted to see for ourselves. Darnell nodded. We've worked hard to make sure everyone feels welcome here. The man shook Darnell's hand. That's important. We want to buy a car, but we want to feel respected and understood. That moment made Darnell feel proud. It showed that the work he had done was making a difference. Back in the offices, the employees had also noticed the change. They talked openly about how they felt more confident and supported. Many had taken part in new training programs that helped them understand the value of diversity and teamwork. One of the salespeople, Maria, shared how she had grown since Darnell became owner. Before, I sometimes felt like my ideas didn't matter. Now, I know my voice is heard. It makes me want to do my best every day. Darnell smiled when he heard stories like that. It reminded him why he had bought the dealership, to build something better than just a business. He wanted a place where people could grow and succeed. Of course, the journey was not without its challenges. Some old habits were hard to change, and there were moments when misunderstandings happened. But Darnell believed that open communication and respect could solve most problems. One day, the team gathered for a special meeting. Darnell stood in front of them, looking proud and happy. I want to thank all of you for your hard work and dedication, he said. This dealership is not just about selling cars, it's about building trust and respect. Together we have created a place where everyone belongs. He paused and looked around the room. There will always be challenges, but I know we can face them together. Our strength is in our respect for each other and our customers. The employees cheered and clapped. It was clear they believed in the new vision for the dealership. Outside the dealership, customers began to notice the change too. More people came in, knowing they would be treated fairly and kindly. Word spread about the dealership's excellent customer service and welcoming environment. Sales increased steadily, and the company's reputation grew stronger in the community. Local newspapers even wrote positive stories about the dealership's transformation and its new owner. For Darnell, the greatest reward was seeing people's lives change for the better. He knew that respect and fairness were not just good business. They were the heart of real success. One afternoon, as the sun set, Darnell stood outside the dealership, looking at the cars shining under the lights. He thought back to the day he was asked to leave the very place he now owned. That memory reminded him how far he had come, and how important it was to keep moving forward with kindness and respect. Because in the end, success is not just about profits or numbers. It's about people, their stories, their dreams, and the way we treat one another. And that was the real story of the dealership's new beginning.